No one in
Well,
Cedar
now,
Ridge
it's
understood
good to
why
see you
Clara
again.
Whitfield stepped into that
Come on
small
in,
mountain
get
chapel
yourself warm
and
by
said
the
yes
fire.
to a man who owned almost nothing. They only knew she had once been promised to comfort, and that the man waiting for her at the altar, Elias Boone, came down from the high country with worn boots, a quiet voice, and a reputation for living alone, where even mail riders rarely went. Clara wanted peace. That was all she had told her sister the night before. Not wealth, not status, just peace. But peace had never been easy in Cedar Ridge. Clara was the daughter of a respected shopkeeper. She had grown up behind polished counters and lace curtains, always expected to marry someone proper, someone steady, someone known. After her father passed, the store barely held together. Whispers began, but offers came from men who sounded helpful but felt calculating. Elias wanted nothing from her. That was the difference. He had come into town only twice that year, selling timber. He spoke little, paid fair, looked people in the eye without trying to impress them. And when Clara once asked why he lived so far from everyone, he had simply said, "Some places let a man think." He never tried to court her loudly, never paraded her through town. He just stood beside her one evening after church and said, "If you ever wanted a quieter life, I could offer that." That was the proposal, and somehow she believed him. Still, as Clara climbed into the modest wagon after the ceremony, her heart pressed against her ribs, because she realized something. She had never seen his home. The townsfolk had noticed that too. Mrs. Hargrove folded her arms as the wagon rolled away. "She'll be back by winter," she muttered. Clara kept her chin lifted as they left the familiar streets behind. For the first mile, neither of them spoke. The road narrowed into a dirt path lined with tall pine. The mountains ahead looked larger than she remembered. "You nervous?" Elias asked gently, not looking at her. She considered lying. "A little," she admitted. He nodded once, as if that made sense. "You can turn back," he said after a moment. "No one would think less of you." But that wasn't true. They would think plenty. And besides, she didn't want to turn back. What unsettled her wasn't fear of poverty. She had lived close to it before. What unsettled her was the quiet certainty in him, as if he carried something unspoken. They rode for nearly an hour. But the road grew steeper, the trees thicker. Clara noticed something odd. This wasn't the direction the timber camps were in. "I thought you lived near the North Ridge," she said carefully. "I do," he replied. But they were heading west. The wagon wheels rolled over smooth stone now, not loose dirt. The climb became easier instead of harder. Clara felt a small crease form between her brows. "You've been up this way before?" she asked. "Once or twice." That answer did not explain the carved wooden post they passed next, nor the fence line hidden between trees. Her fingers tightened in her lap. The mountains opened suddenly into a wide clearing, and Clara leaned forward before she realized she had moved. Because in the center of that clearing stood a house. Not a cabin. Not a rough timber shack. A house. 2 stories. Broad porch. Stone chimney. Windows that caught the late afternoon light like polished glass. The kind of house she had only seen in wealthier counties. The wagon slowed. Clara's breath left her quietly. "This isn't—" She stopped. Elias stepped down first, tying the reins calmly, as though nothing was unusual. She remained seated. The silence between them stretched. "Whose home is this?" she finally asked. He looked up at her, steady as ever. "Ours," he said. The word did not feel like it belonged to her. Ours. Clara stepped down slowly, her boots touching smooth gravel instead of forest soil. "This isn't a mountain cabin," she said, trying to keep her voice even. "No. You told me you lived alone in the hills." "I do." She studied him carefully now. The same worn coat, the same plain shirt, no gold watch, no polished boots. He looked exactly as he had that morning. "Elias," she said quietly, "what is this?" He held her gaze for a long moment, not defensive, not proud, just waiting. "I never said I was poor," he replied at last. "I said I lived simply." That was true. She tried to remember the exact words he had used over the past months. He had never claimed hardship. Others had assumed it, including her. A soft wind moved across the clearing. The house stood solid and silent behind him. "If this belongs to you," she asked carefully, "why let the town believe otherwise?" He hesitated then. For the first time since she had known him, he seemed uncertain. "Because," he said slowly, "I needed to know someone would choose me without it." The words landed heavier than the mountain air. Clara's thoughts raced. Had he tested her? Yet had this all been some quiet experiment? Or had he simply been protecting himself? She looked back at the road they had traveled, then at the house, then at the man she had just married. "You let them think I married beneath me," she said softly. "I let them think what they wanted," he answered. That was not the same thing. 1,000 questions pressed against her ribs, about his past, about the money, about why a man who owned such a home would choose solitude over standing in town. But beneath those questions was something else. If he had hidden this, what else had he not told her? Elias stepped closer, but did not touch her. "If you're angry," he said quietly, "I'll understand." She searched his face for pride, for mockery, for satisfaction. She found none. Only a careful patience. The front door stood slightly open, as if waiting. Clara looked at the house again, then back at him. "I didn't marry you for this," she said. "I know. But you should have trusted me enough to tell me." His jaw tightened just slightly. "I wanted to," he admitted. "More than once." The wind shifted again, carrying the scent of pine and something faintly sweet from the valley below. Clara realized something that unsettled her more than the mansion itself. She did not know her husband as well as she thought she did, and now they stood at the edge of a life she had never imagined. She took one slow step toward the porch, then stopped. "Elias," she said carefully, "what aren't you telling me?" He did not answer right away, and the way his eyes moved, just briefly, toward the upper windows made her chest tighten. Just because whatever waited inside that house, it wasn't just furniture. The way Elias looked at the upper windows stayed with Clara long after the wind settled. It wasn't pride. It wasn't fear either. It was something closer to memory. Clara followed him up the porch steps, each board solid beneath her boots. The front door opened without a creak. Inside, the house felt lived in, but not recently disturbed. A clean wooden table, a stone hearth, shelves lined with books instead of tools. This was not a man's rough hideaway. It was a planned home. "You built this?" she asked quietly. "With help," he said. "Years ago. Years ago. That meant before her." Clara walked further inside. The floors were polished but not flashy. The windows wide enough to flood the room with light. A woven rug lay near the hearth, carefully placed, not tossed. "You live here alone?" she asked. "Yes." Her fingers brushed the back of a chair. "It doesn't feel empty." He didn't answer that. Instead, he moved toward a side table and lit a lamp, though daylight still reached the corners of the room. The small flame steadied the silence between them. "You deserve an explanation," he said at last. Clara crossed her arms loosely, not defensive, but holding herself steady. "I do." He nodded once. "My father owned land farther east," he began. "More than he could manage alone. He built businesses in town, timber contracts, freight agreements." She blinked. Boone. The name was familiar. Not from Cedar Ridge, from the neighboring county. "Boon Freight?" she asked slowly. He met her eyes. "Yes." The realization came quietly but firmly. She had heard of Boon Freight since she was a child. A large operation, reliable, expanding. "You're that Boone?" she whispered. "I am." The room felt smaller somehow. "Then why—" She stopped herself. "Why pretend otherwise?" "I didn't pretend," he said calmly. "I stepped away." "From all of it?" "From the expectations. From the noise." He moved toward the hearth, but didn't light it, just rested his hands on the mantel. "When my father passed, I inherited everything. Contracts, accounts, responsibilities. And opinions." His mouth tightened faintly. "Everyone had one." Clara understood that part too well. "I tried to do it their way," he continued. "Suits, dinners, decisions made to impress instead of build. And I hated the man I was becoming." The honesty in his voice was steady, not dramatic. So he left. "I sold portions of the company," he said. "Kept enough to maintain the land and this house. Quiet investments, nothing flashy. The rest, I handed to men who actually wanted it." Clara studied him carefully. "You could have told me." "Yes." "Why didn't you?" His jaw flexed again. Not irritation, restraint. "Because every time someone learned my name back then," he said, "they saw opportunity." The word hung in the air. Business partners, distant cousins, even church leaders. They all leaned in closer. He looked at her then. "I needed to know if someone would stand beside me when there was nothing to gain." Clara felt that land in her chest. "And if I had turned you down?" she asked. "Then I would have known the answer." It was said plainly, no bitterness. She walked toward the staircase slowly. Her hand slid along the railing. "So I was being measured." "No," he replied quickly. "You were being protected." "From what?" "From being watched." That made her pause. "Watched by who?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he walked to the front window and looked toward the tree line. "There are still men who wish I hadn't stepped away," he said quietly. "They see my absence as insult or weakness." A faint unease settled over her. "You think someone would come here?" "They haven't," he said. "Well, and I intend to keep it that way." That wasn't reassurance. Clara moved up 2 steps, then turned back toward him. "So this house is hidden?" "Yes." "Not just from town?" "Yes." Silence stretched again. She studied the details now with new awareness. The careful positioning of windows, the broad clearing that allowed full view of anyone approaching, the stone foundation built to last. This wasn't just a retreat. It was chosen deliberately. "Elias," she said softly, "did you marry me because you wanted a wife, or because you wanted proof?" The question was gentle, but it landed heavy. He looked at her as if weighing every word before speaking. "I married you," he said slowly, "because when you speak, you don't try to impress me. When you're angry, you don't pretend you're not. And when you care about something, you stand firm." His voice remained even. "You looked at me the same before and after you thought I was poor." Her throat tightened slightly. "That matters," he finished. She held his gaze. "And now?" she asked. "Now," he said, I need to know if this changes anything. There it was, the real question. Not about the house, not about the money, about them. Clara stepped back down the stairs and stood in front of him. You should have trusted me sooner, she said. I know, but I didn't marry a name. He waited. I married a man who said he wanted quiet, and I still do. She searched his face again, looking for any sign of performance. She found none, but something still tugged at her. If someone comes looking, she said slowly, will that quiet disappear? His silence answered more than words. The sun dipped lower outside, casting long shadows through the wide windows. A house this large did not feel small at night. Clara suddenly imagined unfamiliar footsteps on the gravel, letters arriving with demands, old business rivals reappearing. You said they haven't come, she said quietly. They haven't. But you expect they might. A pause. Yes. Her heartbeat quickened, not from fear, but from uncertainty. She had married a man who wanted simplicity. Instead, she had stepped into something unfinished. He took one step closer. If this isn't the life you want, he said gently, I will take you back tomorrow. No questions. The offer was sincere, and that unsettled her even more, because she realized something else now. If she left, it wouldn't be because of the mansion. Yet it would be because she wasn't ready to share the weight that came with it. Outside, somewhere beyond the trees, a distant sound carried faintly through the evening air. Not close, but distinct. The faint rumble of wheels on stone. Elias heard it too. His posture shifted almost imperceptibly. Clara turned toward the window. Is that the road? She asked. He didn't answer immediately, and that silence told her far more than she wanted to know. The rumble came again, clearer this time. Wheels, not wind, not animals. Clara felt the shift in Elias before she saw it. His shoulders straightened, not in panic, but in preparation. How many people know about this road? She asked quietly. Very few, he replied. He crossed the room and extinguished the lamp. The fading daylight was enough for now. From the window, as the clearing remained visible, though the edges had begun to soften in the coming dusk. The sound grew closer. Clara moved beside him. You said they hadn't come. They haven't, he said. Until now. There was no anger in his voice, only acceptance. A wagon emerged between the trees, dark, heavy, pulled by two horses that looked well-fed and expensive. Not a traveler's wagon, a business wagon. Clara swallowed. The driver wore a coat too fine for timber work. Even from a distance, she could tell. Do you know him? She asked. Elias exhaled slowly. Yes. He didn't look surprised. The wagon stopped at the edge of the clearing. The driver climbed down carefully, brushing dust from his sleeves before looking up at the house. Not confused, not lost. Expected. Clara felt something tighten inside her. They found you, she whispered. No, Elias corrected gently. They followed an old trail. That was not the same thing, but it wasn't comforting either. The man approached the porch without hurry. He knocked once, firm, controlled. Elias glanced at Clara. You don't have to stand here, he said quietly. I'm your wife, she replied. Something in his eyes softened at that. He opened the door. The man outside was older than Clara expected, mid-40s perhaps, sharp eyes, clean boots. Evening, Boone, the man said, as if they had spoken last week. Evening, Mr. Calloway. Calloway. Clara had heard that name before, too. Freight routes, Eastern contracts, money that moved faster than most men could track. Calloway's gaze shifted to Clara. "And this must be the bride," he said. His smile was polite, but it measured. Clara inclined her head slightly. "Mrs. Boone." She felt Elias glance at her at that. Calloway nodded. "We heard rumors in town. Thought they were amusing." "Town likes stories," Elias replied evenly. "Yes," Calloway agreed. "But stories tend to grow." A silence followed. Calloway stepped just slightly closer, not crossing the threshold, but testing it. "You left unfinished matters," he said calmly. "Contracts don't vanish because a man decides he's tired." "I sold my shares properly," Elias answered. "Everything was signed." "Signed, yes." Calloway's expression thinned. "But influence isn't paper." Clara watched carefully. There was no raised voice, no threat spoken aloud, but tension lived between the words. "You built something valuable," Calloway continued. "Walking away from it creates imbalance." "I disagree," Elias said. Calloway's gaze drifted again toward Clara. "And now you've married." "Yes." "Interesting timing." Clara felt heat rise in her chest. Not fear, but irritation. "If you've come to congratulate us," she said evenly, "you've done so." Calloway looked at her more directly now. "And if I've come to discuss business?" "Then you should have written ahead," she replied. A pause. Then something unexpected happened. Calloway smiled, not mocking, not dismissive, almost impressed. "I see," he murmured. Elias didn't move. What do you want?" he asked plainly. Calloway's tone shifted, less probing now, more factual. "The eastern routes are expanding. Investors are uneasy without your name attached. They believe your withdrawal signals instability." "It doesn't," Elias said, "but perception matters." Clara understood that. She had watched her father's store suffer over whispers alone. "What are you asking?" Elias said. Calloway studied him carefully. "Return. Publicly. You needn't manage operations. Just stand behind them." "And if I don't?" Calloway's eyes flickered briefly toward the surrounding land. "Then people will wonder what you're hiding." The words landed softly, but they carried weight. Clara felt it then, the choice sitting quietly between them. Not wealth versus poverty, not pride versus humility, visibility versus peace. Elias remained still for a long moment. Then he said, "I built that company to move goods, not to move rumors." Calloway held his gaze. "Rumors move faster." Silence. The evening air cooled. Finally, Elias spoke again. "I will not return to town as a spectacle," he said, "but I will send a statement clarifying my position. No instability, no hidden collapse." Calloway considered that. "And appearances?" he asked. "You may tell them I am well," Elias replied, "and occupied." Calloway's eyes shifted briefly to Clara again. "I see that." Another pause. Then, surprisingly, he extended his hand. "For now, that will do." Elias shook it. The agreement felt temporary, but solid. Calloway stepped back from the porch. "One piece of advice," he added before turning away. "Seclusion invites curiosity." Elias did not respond. Just the wagon rolled away as dusk settled fully across the clearing. Clara remained at the doorway until the sound of wheels faded completely. Then she looked at her husband. "Will that satisfy them?" she asked. "For a while," he said honestly. She stepped onto the porch, breathing in the cooling air. "This house isn't just a home," she said quietly. "No, it's a choice." "Yes." She turned to face him fully. "You didn't marry me to prove something." "No." You married me because you wanted someone willing to stand here. Yes. The truth in his voice was steady. She exhaled slowly. The next time, she said gently, we stand here together. A small shift crossed his face. Relief, perhaps. I should have trusted you sooner, he said again. You should have, she agreed. But she stepped closer anyway. When the mansion behind them no longer felt like a secret, it felt like a responsibility, one they would carry quietly, together. Inside, the rooms waited, not as symbols of wealth, but as space for something steady to grow. And in the mountains, where rumors struggled to climb, peace could still exist, if guarded carefully. They stood side by side as night settled fully over Cedar Ridge, not hiding, not flaunting, just choosing. If you enjoy slow burn Western stories, there are more waiting for you.